Well, hello. Good evening to the people watching us in the UK, and buenas tardes to most of the people watching in Latin America. My name is GA Chaves, GA for the English-speaking crowd. I'm an author and translator from Costa Rica in Central America, and I've been invited to moderate, as it were, this conversation. This event is happening in the context of International Translation Day, which happens every year on September 30th. We decided to do the event today in order to make it available for a wider audience, both in the UK and in Costa Rica and the rest of Latin America. Before we start, I'd like to thank Parthian Books and specifically Catherine Tan for hosting this event and making it available for all of us, and also to the two people who are the stars of this event. I am joined today by Christina Thatcher, who is a writing lecturer at Cardiff Metropolitan University. She is the poetry editor for the Cardiff Review, a tutor for the Poetry School, and is the author of More Than You Were, 2017, and How to Carry Fire, 2020, published both by Parthian Books. Also with us is Esteban Alonso Ramirez. He is the author of the poetry collection Corazón de los Días, published by Ediciones Espiral in 2010, and Ser un Tercero, published by EUNET in 2015. These books were published in Costa Rica. Translation as an activity remains quite elusive to the general reading public, and one way in which we can gauge this elusiveness is by the sheer amount of comparisons or metaphors that are used to describe it. By now, most people are familiar with the Italian pun traduttore, traditore, poet, translator, traitor, as if the essence of translation were to subvert something from the original and masquerade it as something else that doesn't necessarily exist in the original, but it's supposed to represent it in the target language. Just yesterday, I was reading an interview with the Argentinian writer and translator Alan Pauls, in which he claimed that translation is a kind of slavery, or more accurately, servitude. In Paul's descriptions, the translator's life revolves around the text that she's translating at any given point in her life, and this mission, which Pauls also compares to the priesthood, or a self-renouncing vocation, becomes the leading motive of the reading and writing life of the person who takes it up. Today we want to explore and hopefully even enact another metaphor for translation, that of a conversation. Clearly, this conversation happens between languages, but it is also a back and forth, a negotiation, there goes another metaphor, between author and translator. And one can only expect the nature of texts to change over the course of this conversation, or at least that's what we're attempting to explore today. Before we get going with the conversation, hi, Christina. Hi, Esteban Alonso. How are you guys doing?
Yeah, doing really well, thank you.
Glad.
Doing really well, thanks.
Well, let's get the conversation started. Alonso, can you tell us a little bit about how did you first become aware of Christina's poetry?
Yes, sure. It happened that in 2017, early 2017, a common friend of ours got us in touch through a global network of hospitality, and Christina had posted something about coming to Costa Rica, being interested in getting in touch with local poets or maybe organize an event. And this friend of ours got in touch with me and my wife. We were pretty active at the network back in the day. And Christina and I began to write each other, and she passed me along some of her poems. I was so absolutely impressed for their strength and quality. And we began to have this conversation precisely about how to organize an event in San Jose during the days which she was about to be in town. And thanks to Libros Dulos, thanks to you and Diana, we had that opportunity, and as part of the conversation, one of the first things that came up was like, this kind of poetry, it deserves to be understood by as many people as possible, and we cannot assume that all the people getting there will know English or know it in a way to understand the poetry in depth. So we took the decision of give it a try to have translations to Spanish to make this accessible to everyone who was going to attend. And that was the beginning. She sent me 16 poems that I had the privilege to translate, and we shared them during that event. And was a start for the whole
Great.
experience.
So how did your perception of her poems change over the course of translating them? What were some of the things that you have discovered in her poetry that were not there at a first reading?
Well, it's really great because when you begin the translation process, the first thing that you get is that even though you are a competent reader of another language, the process, the cognitive and emotional process of trying to translate not only the words but the experience and the emotions, it transforms you and your perception about the possibilities of your own language and the kind of experience that the poet is giving you in the text. And in Christina's case, as she works so beautifully and so strongly about the topics of grief and addiction, and try to figure out what to do as an adult with the family conflicts that have been part of your life. And it began to move me in ways that I didn't expect. And in the sense of, it's not only the basic empathy that you feel when you understand the situation better and better as you translate, but the sort of resolution it provides you, because any human being has unfinished business with their families,
Yeah.
fathers, mothers, siblings, and it touched me especially because there is a background of alcoholism in my own family, and to be able to read someone else solving through poetry the feelings that come along with that kind of experience, it was such a nurturing and such a nurturing experience, and I felt so understood in many ways. So it was that it was not only the literal words, but the possibilities of experience and resolution, because her own process dealing with those things became my own process of dealing with these things, with its
Okay.
variants and changes. And then, even though in poetry there is always something unsaid, and there are things that
Yeah.
that are anew completely in the translation, and some things that get lost on the way, the basic experience was maintained, and definitely it was both transformative in a cognitive way, but it was also a very healing experience emotionally.
Wow. And what about you, Christina? How has your perception, have you gained any insights about your own poetry now that you've had to go through this back and forth with Esteban Alonso regarding them?
I really like this word, transformative, because I do feel that having a translator look at my work and work on my work with such empathy and kindness was a really transformative process for me. So the thing that it has given me, or the thing that it has reminded me of now as I'm writing new poetry, because as Esteban Alonso said, we worked on some poems from my first collection together, and today we're going to be talking about some from the second. That experience of having those poems translated really helped me when I was starting to write my second collection, because it really made me think about the importance of not just word choice. So poets are precise creatures. We care a lot about the words that we choose, but also things like denotation and connotation. So like here we have the literal definition, but also what are the cultural definitions of this word? What are the definitions as an American person, as a British person? What might Alonso think of this word if I choose this for this poem? And so kind of thinking about my poetry, not just as these personal experiences, but also as outreach. So what can these poems do to reach out to more and more people? And how can I choose my words with that in mind? So not just to serve a poem, but also to serve a multitude of readers. So that was quite an interesting thing for me to think about differently. And also, when you were talking earlier about poetry, people can often think about translation as just the mechanical thing, like, so these literal words that are translated from one language to the next. Really, what a lot of my poems do is that they kind of speak underneath the text. So most of the poetry is most of the things the poem is trying to say are unsaid. So trying to figure out how to tell those stories in a way which, will allow a translator to unpick the things that are not being said underneath. So that has made me think a lot about the different uses of subtext and what we might be able to do with that. And of course, I never really quite understood until we started talking about how sounds made such a difference. So even tonight, we're going to have a chance to kind of hear them in different languages. And I care a lot about sound in my poem. And so thinking about like, well, do I give this up? You know, when I give my poem to a translator, what does it mean to give up the sense of sound or rhythm that I had in my own language? And how does this change the poem? And I guess, you know, in addition to all those technical things, so thinking about word choice and subtext and cultural accessibility, also just learning about ownership. So does this poem belong to me or not? Does this poem belong to readers or not? Does this poem speak to my specific experience? And is it enough to do that? Or does it need to reach out to others? So thinking about, you know, when to let a poem go and be completely public and be completely someone else's collaborative way is also really interesting. So I think this experience has taught me a lot and made me consider a lot of things about my own work.
Great. Well, just to include the people who are watching into this conversation, can we listen to a few of your poems in English and the translation, and then we can talk a little bit about the process of translating them?
Yeah, of course. That sounds great. So would you like me to read them? I can maybe read the first poem from the collection.
And I don't know if you guys have the double columned texts so that people can follow while you're reading.
That would be brilliant. At the moment, it hasn't come up yet.
Okay.
Let's see.
Maybe Catherine can help us with that text.
I think, yeah, it might just need to be approved, perhaps.
1 second.
Okay.
There's always going to be a slight technical issue, isn't there?
Don't worry.
Global world.
Don't worry. One of us can share it. Who has that document? Esteban, do you have it?
I do.
Can you share it, perhaps?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
1 second. Please let me know if you can see it.
Let's see. Just wait a moment. I think it needs to be approved, but there you go.
Oh, there we go.
Perfect.
Excellent.
Can you make it a little bit bigger, just so that it's easier to read?
Yes, definitely.
Maybe a little bit more. Oh, there you go. Yes. Thank you so much. Well, it has all the notes and everything. That's quite an intrusion, but it already gets us into the things that we are going to be talking about. Okay.
Excellent. Okay, so this is insurance report. After the fire, we had 48 hours to produce exact numbers. How many forks? How many pairs of underwear? How many items in the fridge? Unable to remember every object, we were only certain of what was lost. The stained glass unicorn, that Sioux tribe necklace, our grandfather's final brick. We cried out for these totems. Who are we without them? Who are we? Only the inspectors answered back. But what were they worth? What were they worth?
Okay. Alonso, can you read the translation for us, please?
Sure. Informe del seguro. Después del incendio, tuvimos 48 horas para generar números exactos. ¿Cuántos tenedores? ¿Cuántos pares de calzones? ¿Cuántos artículos en la refri? Incapaces de recordar cada objeto, Solo estábamos seguros de lo que se había perdido. El unicornio de cristal pintado, ese collar de la tribu Sioux, el último ladrillo de nuestro abuelo. Gritamos de dolor por estos tótems. ¿Quiénes somos sin ellos? ¿Quiénes somos? Solo los inspectores respondieron, pero ¿cuánto valían? ¿Cuánto?
Okay. I see some notes already in some of the parts of the poems. Would you care to walk us through the process here? What were some of your decisions regarding this poem?
Yes, definitely. In this poem in particular, we one of the things that was pretty necessary was to reproduce the familiar tone of the things that were lost in the fire. So it guided some decisions about how to describe some of the things. For example, in this line, how many pairs of underwear?
Can you make it just a little bit bigger? Because it's kind of difficult to read right now. Like there,
what
that's
about
perfect. Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. How many pairs of underwear? So even though underwear, the literal translation in many standard, very euphemized Spanish would be ropa interior, it doesn't give you the general idea that you were losing clothing that you were wearing every day, in one sense, and the fact that you are doing a catalog, you are doing an inventory of what was lost. So pairs of underwear, the closest thing would be pares de calzones, because it's a phrase that is closer to in my case, Costa Rican Spanish, the variant, the local variant of the Spanish. And it gives you the idea that it's the kind of things that you count and fold and use and everything. So that in one sense. Also, how many items in the fridge? Even though the complete translation also would be an idea like refrigerador or refrigeradora. As we were talking one of these days, refrigeradora is something that you go and buy to a store. You know, you're going for an item that has no familiarity with you whatsoever. But when you're talking about la refri, you know you're talking about the item in your house. You're talking about the device in your house that has the magnets and your children's drawings and everything. La refri is the one that you have been using for a lot and the one you have a personal connection with. So to try to keep that in a general tone. Another decision was how to translate the word produce, because producir números doesn't sound natural in Spanish.
No.
I mean, it could be precisely. So we want to have a word that is able to catch that we, after all, are providing numbers for our report, but also that sounds more natural. So middle ground for that would be a word like generar or proveer. But because it's the family, the one doing the inventory, they are the ones that are generando, that are generating the numbers, producing. So generar was the middle ground, able to catch that. And finally, another decision.
Can we just stop for a moment? Can you go back there? Because I think some of the, well, at least from the title and the beginning of the poem, numbers and the specific language of accounting, just counting things, seems to be very important. And generar, just like to produce, seems like a word that exists more in the context of bureaucracy. And there is that distance between that bureaucracy and what you were talking about in the case of refri and fridge, that domestic reality, that homely life that exists there. So it's a very interesting thing that the poem is doing this. So those decisions are important when, I guess, we're trying to keep with that that contrast that the poem is presenting.
That's right. And finally, another decision was here in the last stanza, when you have these bureaucrats precisely asking for the worth of what was lost. That then, as we had the opportunity to speak, we're talking about how to transform into numbers the things that are uncountable emotionally. That it's impossible to calculate what you have lost in a situation like this.
Right.
So this kind of question, but what were they worth? What were they worth? Into Spanish, it literally would be, pero cuánto valían? ¿Cuánto valían?
Right.
However, this kind of repetition is not natural in Spanish,
Huh.
and also to cut the very last question to just cuánto gives an idea of both the quantity and both the emotional weight of what they are asking about. So, pero cuánto valían? Cuánto? It's more natural, but besides, it gets you into the idea that they really don't understand what they're
Right.
that they're asking from that people. An example is, I don't know, I'm wearing my father's watch, and he's not with us any longer, something like that. He's still with us, but it's just an example. And
Yeah.
the thing is that if someone can say, okay, I will give you $20 for that watch, and I will say no. I mean, they can
Right.
tell me in Spanish cuánto, and I will
Right.
say no, no cuánto. O sea, es imposible. It's impossible to say how much it's worth. So this
There's the
kind of
phrase
decision.
sentimental value to
Yeah,
things.
that's right.
This poem is playing precisely with that. The value in the market. Yeah, I can say that your watch is worth $20, but since you got it from your father or your grandfather, it's worth. It's impossible to estimate how much it's worth. Yeah.
So yes, that was why this final decision about the last question was.
We have somebody in the comments, Rocavatus, praising how you condensed that meaning in the last line, and I think it's a very good way of doing it. I mean, it doesn't necessarily contradict anything that the previous line does. It's still asking about the specific amount, but it also leaves the possibility of thinking in more emotional terms for that. Another thing that I wanted to mention about the decision to use refri, I think that you're also very conscious of the place in which you are translating this. Spanish is a language spoken in over 20 countries around the world, and we don't necessarily feel words in the same way from one country to the next. And this is a word that would immediately replicate that domestic, homely environment for a Costa Rican, at least. I don't know in other places, but this is an important consideration. It's not just so much about making it regional for the sake of using Costa Rican language, but this is the language that comes closer to the heart, which is precisely part of the poem, a great part of its meaning and its force. Okay, can we hear another one?
Yes, of course. This is absolutely fantastic for me. Having years of different kinds of conversations about these poems, it's so amazing to get to see them on the screen discussed by the two of you. So thank you so much for that. Okay, which poem would you most like me to read? I think that we were going toward starting here at the first one and then going to the last poem in the collection. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So
this can you just Esteban, can you make it just a little bit bigger? There you go. I think that can be read. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Sorry, okay. Christina.
No, that's okay. So as we just saw, the sort of book, How to Carry Fire, opens with this insurance report poem. So just after the burning down of my childhood home. And the second half of my collection looks at kind of rebuilding homes here in Wales, which is where I'm at today. This is the final poem in the collection, which is called How to Love a Gardener for Rich, my husband. So here we go. How to Love a Gardener for Rich. Love, like the horse chestnut, loves carbon, like the sun isn't millions of miles away or doomed. Love, like a blue fur amongst white pines, like a wide shovel opening the earth. Rewind your favorite moments over early dinners, the correct identification of an olive tree climbing 65 feet up a fat trunk, turning backpack pockets into houses for leaves. Love as eagerly as sprouting seeds, as hungry as a goat up an argon tree. Love, like you are spotting a red squirrel for the first time. Relish in your blooming knowledge of Latin, wood chopping, propagation, love as easy as hibiscus roots drink rain. Breathe in the smell of earth-drenched boots, savor the quick-flowing photos of pheasants and hedgehogs and newts. Love like a pioneer species. Love like sempervirens, evergreen. Love like every green thing ever planted will live long and never burn.
Wow. Esteban?
Thanks. ¿Cómo amar a un jardinero? Para Rich. Ama como el castaño de Indias ama el carbono, como si el sol no estuviera a millones de kilómetros o condenado. Ama como un abeto azul entre pinos blancos, como una pala ancha que abre la tierra. Rebobinar tus momentos favoritos en las cenas tempranas, la correcta identificación de un olivo, escalar los 20 metros de un tronco grueso, convirtiendo bolsillos de mochila en casas para las hojas. Ama con la impaciencia de las semillas que brotan, con el hambre de una cabra en la copa de un argán. Ama como si estuvieras viendo una ardilla roja por primera vez. Sentí placer en tu floreciente conocimiento del latín, de cortar madera, de la propagación. Ama con la facilidad con que las raíces de flor de Jamaica beben la lluvia. Respira el olor de las botas llenas de tierra. Saborea el paso veloz de fotos de paisanes y erizos y tritones. Ama como una especie pionera. Ama como un sempervirens, siempre viva. Ama como si cualquier cosa verde alguna vez plantada fuera a vivir largamente y nunca arder.
Okay. Some comments there too. So what can you tell us about this poem, Esteban?
This one has been a wonderful, wonderful experience to translate and to read and reread. And it was quite challenging because besides of, the most basic process of trying to catch the meanings and the layers of the poem implied a good deal of research in botanics. And that has been a really lovely experience because there were a lot of things that I learned in the process, and I really feel that it gives you, it gave me as a translator something of the experience that Christina had learning from Rich about gardening and about plants and trees, because many of the decisions had to respond precisely to what are the qualities of certain plants, or what are the names they receive, because the Spanish-speaking world, it has so many latitudes that the names change so much depending on the country that I had to search plant by plant what are the names that are used in Costa Rica to reflect the experience. For example, a decision taken in that sense is that even the word hibisco exists in Spanish for translate hibiscus. Nobody calls it that here. Here is flor de Jamaica.
Flor de Jamaica,
so,
yes.
In that sense, that was one of the decisions. Another one, the horse chestnut. It's not a familiar tree here as far as I'm aware. However, to know the qualities of the plant guided me. For example, the first line, love like the horse chestnut loves carbon. Carbon can be translated into Spanish either as charcoal or as carbono, like the element. And to know that, in fact, the horse chestnut, one of its main characteristics is that it is a high carbon absorber. You know that this is a tree that takes an unusual amount of carbon from the air. That was the one guided me to not translate it into something that was definitely misleading if I had chosen carbon instead of carbono. And other details coming from this research about plants. For example, I was not familiar with the argan tree, but then I searched, and I believe many people have seen the pictures of of these goats eating on top of the
Yeah.
tree. It's very unforgettable, but I had not the word for the tree, so that was a discovery over there. And other decision about the name of the plants, well, hibiscus. Other one was what to do with sempervirens or
Mm-hmm.
sempervirens.
Evidence. Mm-hmm.
That that is it's a kind of cypress that it's
Yeah.
evergreen. But what to do with that in Spanish? To keep the Latin term, to be faithful to the source.
Mm-hmm.
But what to do then with the word evergreen?
Right.
Because
The English is a literal translation. It's evergreen, right?
Mhm,
That doesn't necessarily happen in Spanish. So you needed to negotiate that.
that's right. And the por siempre viva, that was a discussion, and I'm really thankful with you to see the experience of these trees in northern countries that can receive that name, even though it's not that familiar in here, and what implications they had from their characteristics, their wood, and so on,
Mm.
leading to to what was the word at the chose at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Other decisions taken, of course, what the conjugation of the verbs, because the verb love appears over and over again.
Yeah.
But there is something here in Costa Rica. Uh, there are there are three registers about how we use the second singular person. It's quite a
Right.
topic in Spanish in general, but in Costa Rica we use three different ways to say you.
Yeah.
One of them is usted, that is very formal, even though it can be used in familiar context. Another one is vos. Costa Rica is one of the many countries and regions that use vos. That for some is a remnant version of the Spanish, even though that's not true. Actually, it's quite alive here in Costa Rica
No.
or Argentina and Uruguay, and some regions of Mexico and Central America as well. And of course, there is a transition in younger generations to use more and more tu.
Yeah.
That is the standard in many countries. But it will be so artificial for me to translate this como ama,
Right.
rebobina. It simply doesn't roll in the tongue because I have never spoken into my familia and my family. I'm sorry, my family and my friends. I have never ever think of somebody reading naturally this poem in two.
Right.
So the decision was to all the verbs to be conjugated using vos.
Mm-hmm.
And another final decision to better translate the experience of the poem was to change the words and measures referring to the imperial system to the metric system.
Right.
So, for example, like the sun isn't millions of miles away, even though we know millas means something, it doesn't give you an idea because we have been using the metric system almost from the
Yeah.
beginning. So, como si el sol no estuviera a millones de kilómetros, or another one, climbing 65 feet up a fat trunk.
Right.
I have no idea how much is 65 feet until I went to a converter and it's 19 point something meters, so I translated into a
20
good
meters. Yeah.
20 meters.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, that among many other of the decisions, because where to use an article or not in some of the words, taking into account the pace and the rhythm of the poem was another thing as well,
Right.
because English has this flexibility of using many words without the article and still sounding natural. Spanish doesn't have that much these
No.
characteristics, so some decisions have to be taken in that sense as well.
Right. And again, it's an effort in trying to make this closer to the reader. I agree with your what you were explaining about the verbs, that hortative sense of it's kind of like a command. But if you had used ama with two, it sounds like an army general is giving you that command. Whereas with
Mhm.
ama, it's somebody giving you an exhortation to do something that they consider good. And it's interesting how just within a small country like Costa Rica, this can be very problematic, and it forces you to make decisions. I wanted to ask Christina: are you being realistic in the descriptions of these, in all of these trees and plants, or is there an emotional charge to them that may have been a challenge for the translator?
I think that they're all sort of emotionally charged in a way because, I mean, all of the descriptions of the plants are faithful to the type of the plants that they were. So actually that has obviously lended something to Alonso's translation, because he was able to do the kinds of research that I was also doing on these plants and come to the same kinds of conclusions about what the plants are doing and how they interact with the elements, but also how that might represent in many ways the different kinds of love, or the different ways in which we might love someone. So I wanted these plants to have that kind of faithfulness. But there were so many different plants that I was learning about and that I could choose from, that I picked ones which demonstrated the bigness of this love that I was feeling, not just for my husband, but also for this burgeoning understanding of language and of growth and of difference and surprise and of hope, because so much of this poem is thinking about how we continue to grow, how we continue to love, how we continue to regenerate, even in the face of doom, or even in the face of, the possibility of fire. So I feel like a lot of the plants that I chose in this poem had those kinds of qualities as plants. They had this robustness or this strength or this representation of the love that I was trying to get at. So in a way, I wanted them to do both things. And it seems as though from this conversation that at least staying a bit faithful to the plants themselves was actually a help in the translation process, because you were able to then find them and decide how to portray or reflect them in the translated piece. So that was really interesting to hear.
Yeah. And all of those images leading up to that final evergreen image, that life that keeps being renewed. That's a very powerful way of writing it. I think this is a very good example, I think, of what Alan Pauls was describing as the servitude of the translator. When, I think Esteban Alonso signed up to translate poetry, not to learn about botany, and yet that's what he ended up doing. And that's one of the most fascinating facets of translation. I'm currently translating the poems of a American poet who lives here in Costa Rica, Bill Harris, and he has a lot of machine sounds, cars and trains. And I find myself recently wanting to hang out in car shops just to go and see how people would describe those sounds in that specific environment, so that I can bring that all of that knowledge into the poems. Just one thing in which the translation work takes up over your life. So
sorry.
No, please.
I think that's something that I really love about poetry. I mean, I feel like as writers, one of the things that many of us are is just intensely curious about the world and about understanding all the different facets of the world. And poetry gives us an opportunity to explore those curiosities and give us an excuse to learn and understand even the smallest or most surprising things about the world. And that feels really, really exciting. So I feel like in a way here, the car sounds, the botany, like that pursual of understanding of these things which we didn't previously understand is also part of what it means to write poetry, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we still have time for one more poem.
Oh, great.
Awesome.
Okay, Alonso, which one would you like to discuss?
Actually, I would think domestic would be a good one. Actually, we had a good deal of dialogue about how to choose the right words in Spanish for this poem. So it will be a really interesting one to talk about.
Great. Okay, I'll read this one for us.
Thanks.
Domestic. I wash the plump beans, pull the strings from their seams, crack their backs until I hear the snap, snap, and expose their small kidneys, dull, cabled to the inner wall, which is soft as felt, reflective as thread, then settle them into hot water I have boiled in a home I never thought I would have.
Wow.
En español. Doméstica. Lavo los cubaces, tiro de las fibras, de sus vetas, rompo sus costados hasta que oigo su chasquido y expongo sus pequeños riñones, opacos. cableados al muro interior que es suave como fieltro, reflectante como hilo, y luego los deposito en el agua caliente que he hervido en un hogar que jamás pensé que tendría.
Okay. This is one of those poems that make you think like, oh yeah, I could translate this in a couple of minutes. And
No,
then not quite. Well,
definitely.
first of all, I have one question about the title. You go from domestic to domestica. You have to add a gender to that word in Spanish. So how did that decision come about?
Well, that was a decision because, domestic here, it works in a double sense that it was necessary to try to convey in Spanish. One of them is that it's a domestic situation, it's a domestic scene. Both words,
Escena,
situación,
which is feminine.
situación and escena, both words are have
Feminine.
female grammar, feminine grammar gender in Spanish, right? And also because, Christina's voice as a woman, I wanted also to convey that that she's talking from a female perspective. So that one was able to convey both senses by adding the grammatical gender to it. And yes, that was why it was chose like domestica instead of domestico. That definitely would have been totally misleading about the general sense of the poem.
Yeah, I agree. So I see you have a few words, and you have a word underlined, hilos, but you read fibras. What was that about?
Well, that one and that one was a good source of dialogue actually. GA and I had a good opportunity to discuss and try to figure out the best choice for this because many of the words in this first stanza in particular, they seem to have a very literal meaning in Spanish, but when you begin to read that and you catch that the poem is talking about something you're doing in a kitchen, you easily figure out that the literal meanings or the more usual words that you will select make no sense whatsoever in this context. Context is everything in this stanza. So, for example, to select, I have never ever listened to anyone in the kitchen, myself, my mother, anyone I have ever been in a kitchen to talk about a vegetable or anything having an hilo. No, they have fibers, they have fibras. In that sense, even though hilo may sound correct, fibra is the right word in this context.
Just for the English-speaking crowd, the problem with hilo is that it means thread, like in clothes, and it takes the image completely to a different context.
That's right. Yes, anything related to vegetables or anything like that has fibras.
Yeah.
And same applies. Now we know that we're dealing with you're cracking the beans out. So in that sense, seems as well it's not appropriate to translate it as costuras or anything of sorts. It's vetas. That is the word that you're applying in Spanish for one of those. And same with bags. That definitely is not a physical bag like in a person or animal. No, we're talking about los costados. We're talking about the sides of. We're talking about the sides, and to select chasquido instead of a snap is because it's the kind of word that conveys also the sound when you're opening something when you're about to cook.
Yeah. It's funny because part of the charm of Christina's original, the snap is the repetition, but chasquido kind of already contains those two sounds that are already very onomatopoeic in nature. Yes. So the one word does it.
Yes, great. And finally, another decision was plump beans that, as we also had the chance to talk about, frijoles gordos, it won't sound natural anywhere in the Spanish-speaking world. And there are different words for this kind of bean in different countries, but the one in Costa Rican Spanish is cubas or cubaces. We always use it in plural. That is used in many recipes. So yes, that definitely was the word to choose.
Right. It's interesting because you're domesticating that image in the poem. When a
That's so
poem called
wonderful.
Domestic, and you're making it more real here. Yeah. Mhm. Okay. Just because we're running out of time, we wanted to do something with everybody else. If the people who are watching want to do this, Christina gave us a poem that we have not, that Esteban Alonso has not translated. We have not read yet. And what we want to do is just kind of show the process, the kind of conversation and interactions that go on when trying to make decisions about a translation. So the poem that Christina sent us was The Chase. Esteban, can you make that a little bit bigger?
Definitely.
Thank you. So the first thing that Esteban did right before we started with this broadcast was he run the first stanza through Google Translate, and that's what we got. See, one of the things that a lot of people think about the mechanics of translation, which Christina was mentioning earlier too, is that it's a matter of negotiating between dictionaries. And sometimes, well, dictionaries take you up to a certain point, but then all of these decisions that we've been discussing kind of need to, they need different decisions. So this is a brief exercise that we're doing. We're now going to translate a poem on site and see how it goes. And if people on the comments sections want to help us and they have better options than the ones we discussed, we would love for you to help us out with that. The poem is called The Chase, La Persecución. I lost it there for a moment. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, Christina, can you please read the first stanza, just the first stanza, and then we can proceed. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So it's called The Chase, and the first stanza is, I press my feet into the rubber mats and know this truck will protect me from summer lightning.
Okay. So what did Google Translate did there, Esteban?
Google Translate gave us La Persecución. Presiono mis pies en la alfombra de goma y sé que este camión me protegerá del rayo de verano.
Okay. Now, that is a literal translation. It doesn't take me anywhere. The first thing I would say is, what in the world is an alfombra de goma?
Yes, definitely. I know that when we're talking about cars, probably in Costa Rica we will say alfombrilla.
Okay.
And it will be very self-explanatory. Please, any Costa Rican online, please guide us if we're giving a misleading translation in here.
Yeah, somebody's watching from other Latin American countries that can provide us with something more precise that they use too.
Yes, also would be wonderful.
Alfombrilla. Okay, presiono mis pies en la alfombrilla. Okay, so that the next line gives you the context. It's a truck. So
that's right.
Okay, ya sé que y sé que este camión me protegerá del rayo verano.
So one thing here is, what is the word we want to use for truck? Because truck actually in English can be used for different sizes of vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
And in Spanish, we have, for example, we have, when we say camión, the
I'm imagining a freight.
Yes, exactly. We're thinking about something really big and with many wheels and, well, with a freight, of course.
Yeah.
But it can also be translated as camioneta, but camioneta is a word that is more used in other countries. It makes me think more about Mexico than in Costa Rica. So what will be the correct term in Costa Rican and Spanish for translating truck in here? That's next one I'm thinking about.
Do you know what the funny thing? I think in, at least in Costa Rica, the solution would be to put this in English and use a pickup, un pickup, because we do say that. Yo tengo un pickup. Yes. That's a really funny thing that we have to go back to English.
Yes, but actually, if you want to reflect the experience, I believe this would be a natural solution, closer to everyday speech, right? Another thing is, now that we're talking about natural solutions, for example, will protect me. It can be translated literally as me protegerá. But in natural speech, I believe that it will be closer to va a protegerme o me va a proteger.
Yeah, we don't use the future tense much in Costa Rica.
That's right.
Yeah, we use the present progressive for the most part. That's the thing that was sounding a little bit off there. Like, this is something that I would get from a movie, not from somebody talking to me. Me va a proteger.
That's
And
right.
then Google Translate faltered on that line, I think, quite obviously. Rayo de verano, summer lightning. It's
Yes,
not
summer
literal.
lightning. Yes, because lighting actually is it's relámpago.
Right. Right. A ray
Yes,
of summer is what Google gave us in Spanish, and that sounds like a very beautiful image, a ray of light, not quite a storm.
that's right. So yes, because rayo in this context will convey something like a sunbeam or something like that.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely not this threatening natural phenomenon. So, in that case, even though yes, now we know that we should use relámpago or relámpagos, we can actually. It's more usual to use it in a plural collective, relámpagos. But then, what to do with summer? What to do with verano? Is the next thing. The next thing. We can use de los relámpagos del verano will be correct in general terms, but then I'm beginning to wonder. In that case, it would be useful to use veraniego, but veraniego usually has a series of very positive connotations in Spanish that I believe won't be faithful to this. So another thing would be. It will be a little far-fetched, but in trying to convey sense, I'm thinking about a solution like de los relámpagos en verano.
De los relámpagos en verano. Okay. So the point is that this lightning is happening in weather when there is no rain. Am I reading that correctly, Christina?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. See, in a country where before global warming, like Costa Rica, we had 9 months of rain. When you say relámpago, you say lightning, people immediately think of rain. So this is actually a very important specification. And now I'm wondering, and this is the kind of work that you would have to do outside of the page and kind of go and do somewhere else. I seem to remember hearing the expression relámpagos secos, like dried lightning, and I think it may refer to that, but I'm not sure. I'm just thinking as we go. But this is the kind of thing that would make me write a note on the side and just tell me, go and check this. Maybe ask somebody who knows about the weather.
That's right. That's right. That's a really good one. For example, this is one of the things that I will use a note. Definitely. A side note to make some research about it. So. So, yes, and then take a decision about what sounds more natural and what will convey better information for a potential reader.
Right.
And another thing that got me thinking is that when you read the whole poem at a glance, there is a very, very cinematic quality to it.
Okay.
You really feel inside this situation.
Driver's cabin in this case.
Yes, in the driver's cabin and running away from the lighting and the storm. And in that case, even though la persecución is literal and it's correct, I'm thinking that if I was about to see in a movie poster the title in Spanish, I will probably they will decide for persecución to use it without the article. It makes it stronger. And definitely gets you like totally into situation. The article somehow softens the image that the word conveys.
It's true. Yeah, it makes it particular, like so something that happened, not something that is happening. Yeah. By the way, I have from the comments, Pablo Rojas Vargas just confirmed that in Spanish we have the expression tormenta seca, like a dry storm. And that's the phenomenon that it describes. See, great. Thank you so much. Like this is precisely what we wanted to do.
So tormenta seca, it's the one.
Right. The la tormenta seca.
That's great. That's perfect.
Great.
Well, I'm learning a little bit of meteorology as well then in the process.
So let's try and do the second stanza then. Christina, would you mind reading it, please?
Yep. The storms are coming. Only 3 seconds between the crack, crack of thunder.
Okay. A little bit of a challenge in that third line. The storms
Definitely.
are coming. Okay. Okay. See, that
The
progressive
storms-
in English. How do we do that in Spanish with the same kind of naturalness?
Yes, that's the thing. Here is like a reverse process from the one we were using for "Will Protect Me."
Yeah.
Because, for example, literally we can say in Spanish, "Las tormentas están viniendo." That's a
Right.
literal translation. I won't imagine anyone saying it like that, especially if they're nervous.
Right.
So,
Somebody learning the language might say that, and it would immediately be caught as not natural. Yeah.
that's right. So in that case, for example, we can preserve the order of the sentence like "Las tormentas vienen" for contundency, but it also, I feel that doesn't quite fit. My preliminary solution would be "Vienen las tormentas" and a colon.
Okay. All right.
Vienen-
Uh-huh. How about an emphatic "Ya vienen las tormentas"? Like, we say that "Ya va a llover" here.
Mhm.
Oh, it's about to rain. Hurry up. Bring the clothes from the line.
Yes, you're right.
Ya vienen las tormentas. And again, these are considerations that largely depend on where you're speaking the language and the kind of public that will be reading this. Maybe this would not be a phrase that would convey the same kind of urgency to people in other Latin American countries. But in Costa Rica, this is something that we would definitely use. Ya vienen las tormentas. Uh-huh.
Yes, that's right. For example, yes, it's actually this thing of the phrase "are coming" definitely conveys this urgency that "ya" has in Spanish.
Uh-huh.
So definitely, it's quite an appropriate solution. For example, I don't know, quoting the slogan of an ill-remembered show. Nobody in Spanish said "el invierno viene" or "el invierno está viniendo" instead of "winter is coming."
Yeah.
The translation that you saw everywhere was "Ya viene el invierno."
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's true. Mm-hmm.
So it conveyed this kind of sense of something ominous coming upon you. So, well, in this first line, we can reconsider, of course, but "Ya vienen las tormentas." The second line actually can go with a little more literal translation.
Uh-huh.
Solo 3 segundos
Okay.
entre,
Uh-huh.
because this is going to follow in the next line.
Right. Okay.
So-
Okay. So here's my my 2 cents. With solo, we have a debate in Spanish because we have two forms of the word. One with an accent mark in the first O, and it means only, like exclusively, or solo, which means alone. But the Royal Academy in Spain has decided that we don't really need to use that. And now this is one of those cases where I would think that is a precision that it's necessary. It means to it's not exclusively, it's barely
That's
3
right.
seconds between one crack and the next. And I'm wondering if probably the best word in that case would be something like apenas.
In that sense, yes,
It could probably apenas 3 segundos.
Precisely. Actually, the thing is, as you said, that I was studying the fact that 3 segundos entre one thing and the other, 3 segundos entre una cosa y la otra, o desde una cosa y la otra, or in between one thing and another. However, apenas, that has a similar but not quite the same. Actually,
You're
apenas, apenas, solo definitely indicates that we're talking about a small time frame, but apenas makes it even shorter. So we're dealing with a really, really small time frame, and there is a sense of urgency as well in this context.
That's true. Great.
So, and then we have a challenge. What to do with crack, crack in the third verse.
I think Rocavatus in the comments is supporting our idea that maybe we can go with apenas for that, the translation of only. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Thank you.
I agree.
Thank you so much for that.
Right, the third line, the crack, crack of thunder. How does thunder sound in Costa Rica?
Yeah, what would be the word?
What's the accent?
And then you have something to think about, because we know that the onomatopoeics it won't survive well the translation. There will be a problem in there. So we have something. For example, sometimes I use placeholders in here, just like
right. This is what you do the field work and stand under a storm, trying not to get killed and trying to get the specific sound.
Exactly, because in a moment like this, it would be just a good moment, like to search for your good old trusted dictionary,
right,
or going to word reference or Lingui, or any other tool of contextual translation, and search for what kind of solutions have been tried before, and decide if one of them sounds sufficient to you or appropriate to you. Because, for example, crujido, that is a word that comes to my head, the crack, crack. Cuando algo cruje, it conveys that in Spanish. However, this crujido is longer. Crack, crack is only 2 syllables. And gives you this thing that is only one thing happening. No?
It's describing it, but it's not making it happen in the line.
That's right. That's right.
I have in the comments Merichel Serrano Tristan. She's commenting that in Spanish we have the word crack without the K at the end, and that is the onomatopoeic for something that breaks. So that's a start.
Okay, so thank you very much, Merichel, for that.
Yeah. Los cracks de los truenos. Wow. It actually sounds pretty powerful.
Yes, that's right. And crack, crack, do you believe we keep it like this, or maybe to use Gaelic would convey any additional meaning as in the original in English?
Yeah. See, this is where translation becomes a neurotic thing. Like crujido, it doesn't take 3 seconds to be pronounced, but crack, crack makes that event much shorter, which should be emphasized in the only 3 seconds between one crack and the next. So that's the performative part of words. It's important.
Definitely, because even another detail is that crujido is just one word, but when you say crack, crack, it's forcing you to the pause. That is exactly the situation that is being described.
True.
So we're talking about faithfulness in any possibility of faithfulness. That pause between the sounds is very necessary.
Wow. Yeah, it's true. Rocabatos is saying in Spanish, this is actually a serious problem. In Spanish, it's more polysyllabic, and we end up with longer verses. And in a verse like this is something you really need to negotiate, because it's not so much the meaning is quite evident, but what you're trying to do is replicate the performativeness of words there. Pablo Rojas Vargas is saying this is something that I only recently heard. El suanfonsón de los truenos. Suanfonsón. That's a word that I just recently discovered, and I'm very glad that he brought it up, because this is just a word that describes that sound. It means nothing outside of that. I wonder. It's SUANFON. SON. And anybody who's familiar with the Baroque nature of thunder in the tropics would know that this longer word is doing exactly that.
Yes, it has something. The inner music of this word is very tempting as a solution.
Yeah. So
it's interesting.
So there you go.
However, I wonder, this term is I mean, of course, I'm not aware it's being used in Costa Rica. It is more like another country, or
I have no idea. I only recently discovered that somebody wrote that, and I saw it, and now somebody in the comments Pablo Rojas Vargas is bringing it up. So, you know, that's the thing. You're exploring with things. Of course, well, we're not only because of time, but also because it wasn't the purpose of this exercise. We're not going to finish the poem, but of course, it needs to be a complete work. And one of the things that happens once you're done with a preliminary version, a first draft of the poem, is you need to go back to some of these decisions and see how they work in terms of every other decision that you've made along the way, right?
That's correct, but
Yeah.
you're going maybe verse by verse and stanza by stanza. But when you have the complete poem, you need to reconsider every one of the decisions as you're saying, and also when you are maybe if you're dealing with a whole collection or a selection, how it matches with the rest of it. Because it's very usual now that inside a collection, many of the poems give light about what's really happening in other poems, and it makes you reconsider many aspects of your decisions.
Okay, I get some clarifications from Ivania and Paulo. The Swan Fun song, it's a made up word that was recently went viral because it was some kind of video and somebody is talking about it, and he was just trying to describe like blah 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 blah, something like that, and what he said was Swan Fun song. So, you know, it's interesting that we could have poetry actually institutionalizing that word for the first time in Spanish. So there you go, guys. Kudos to you both.
Thank you very much for
great.
that. Very fascinating.
Well, unfortunately, we are running out of time, but I really appreciated this conversation and this exchange. I also want to thank Rucavatos, Pablo Rojas Vargas, Ivania, and also Claire Potter. They commented on the thread and the comments. Thank you so much for being with us. I hope that this was clarifying and useful to all of the people who attended. And Christina and Esteban, thank you so very much for inviting me to do this. We've been planning this for weeks, and it's been a great learning experience. I'm very happy to have been part of this conversation. I don't know if you have any closing remarks before we go.
Well, first, I just want to thank you so much for moderating so brilliantly tonight. And thank you to Esteban Alonso, who has been for over 3 years now, having poetic conversations with me, both in person and via WhatsApp. It's been an incredible experience and has really helped me think about poetry in a new and different way. So I'm really grateful for that and also for his friendship. So this was just a really great way to come together and showcase a little bit of this process, which often isn't necessarily secretive, but isn't often kind of discussed in such an open way. So it has been a real joy.
Thanks. And on my end, I would say it's been one of the biggest honors to me to be able to work on your poems, to read them, reread them, trying to find them and trying to build the bridges between both languages. I feel that definitely this is a time where when bridges between languages and cultures are more necessary than ever, and poetry is definitely has this power to build community and hiding our sensibilities and understand different things to tell us that beyond the barriers that we built around ourselves and our countries, we're not alone in many of our most important experiences. And definitely this has been, as I said it earlier, a transformative experience. It's been an amazing honor. And yes, I really hope that there are channels and opportunities to share these poems with more people, so they have the chance to have the same experience that I had reading them.
I forgot to thank. Sorry.
And Gustavo, thank you very much for all the light you have given me in this process and for supporting us so brilliantly along the whole process.
It was my pleasure, really. I forgot to mention Merichel Serrano, who also helped with the translations. Thank you very much. And Sebastian Arce sends greetings. Thank you once again to Rucavatos, who's been participating there. And I also want to thank Parthian Books for making this possible through their YouTube channel. And Catherine Tan, she's been in the controls and the shadows behind us, but helping us immensely. thank you all for this opportunity. And well, good night to people in the UK, and buenas tardes to the rest of Latin America. Bye-bye.
Thank you so very much.
Ciao.